After much speculation about when the next general election will be held, last week Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced that the UK will go to the polls on the 4th of July, just 6 weeks from now. The announcement came as a surprise to many who were expecting Sunak to hold off until late autumn or winter, with the 5th of November being frequently whispered around mainstream media as a likely date. Some Tories believe this is a huge gamble, but Sunak seems to believe he can ride off the back of a recent reduction in inflation rates for some reason, and that voters will simply forget about the last 15 years of Tory cuts, austerity and corruption scandals that have peppered the Conservatives' tenure since 2010. That said, Labour leader Keir Starmer thinks he'll be strolling into number 10 with a landslide majority in a month and a half's time, but underwhelming recent local election results and professional projections indicate that the reality may lie much further from his hubris-charged expectations. Along with Labour's latest relaunch video and accompanying pledges that look like they were drawn up by Dominic Cummings himself, Keith has shown that despite his one-word clarion call of change being the byword for his upcoming campaign, there's little to no distinction between his party and the current government. In this video, I'll be discussing why I expect the result to be different than indicated in the polls, where Labour currently have a 20-point lead, what the overall outcome is likely to be, and also some interesting key seats to watch out for. This is My Left Eye, thanks for being here with me today. If you enjoy my content, then please subscribe and hit the thumbs up button to help the channel reach a wider audience. You can also join as a member for just 99p with some great perks for you to enjoy. Hit the join button and check out the channel description to see other ways to support us. So then, let's get into the first of what I'm expecting to be many videos on the general election in 2024 and see what's happening. First of all, let's have a quick reminder of what happened in the 2017 and 2019 elections to get a sense of how we ended up where we are today, and also why we've had to go through the last 5 years of misery under the Tories since we last went to the ballot. Back in 2017, Theresa May was Prime Minister and Jeremy Corbyn was Leader of the Opposition. This was, of course, just a year after the EU referendum, and both parties at the time pledged to honour the referendum result. May had taken over from David Cameron, who stood down after being part of a narrowly defeated Remain campaign and had only held a referendum to try and claw back some right-wing votes from human-slash-toad hybrid Nigel Farage's UK Independence Party. Labour had a solid socialist manifesto, having moved left from the Blair/Brown/Miliband neoliberal position under Corbyn, who won the party leadership contest by a huge majority and promised to take the party back to its roots. Soon after he won the leadership race, membership increased, making Labour the biggest political party in Europe with around 600,000 members. Theresa May was under huge pressure for the Tories' 7 years of failures and felt the need to prove her legitimacy and popularity by calling a general election. Her misassumptions were soon realised as Corbyn wiped out the Tories' majority, bringing a hung parliament, and forced May into bribing the DUP for their 10 seats to form a coalition government with the narrowest of majorities. It's worth noting also that many of the Blairite neo-libs within Labour wanted and expected Labour to fail 7 years ago. For example, here's a reminder of Stephen Kinnock's shocked expression as he reacted to the results coming in live. Can you remember another time when parties' MPs seemed upset at making huge gains in a general election? I certainly can't, but it is, of course, very telling. But why am I bringing this up? Simply put, this result genuinely frightened right-wingers in both the Tory party and Labour, and they decided something had to be done to protect the wealthy and hinder the man who was looking to give more to the poorest in our country and bring in a fairer society with policies including higher wages for low earners, utility nationalisation, taxes on the rich and a sound environmental policy. This went as far as an internal coup within Labour itself in 2016, a year after Corbyn was elected leader of the Labour Party, something which the current leader Keir Starmer was involved in. However, this only led to another leadership vote which Corbyn won by an even bigger majority than the first one, and the traitors in Labour were soon exposed as careerist Tories in disguise. Theresa May was ousted
to serve the country I love,
and replaced with hack journalist and comb negator Alexander Boris de Faffel Johnson, who had been fired from every job and government position he'd ever had when he became Prime Minister, and that's where things started to turn very, very ugly. And I'm not just talking about this.
Our exit poll is suggesting that there will be a Conservative majority when all the votes are counted after this election of December 2019. The Conservatives on 368 seats and Labour way down.
Having failed to overthrow Jeremy Corbyn in the 2016 coup, and with the public showing a strong desire for more socialist policies in the general election the following year, right-wing members of the Labour Party colluded to hinder their own party even further in the subsequent ballot and to create enough of a smear campaign to keep the Tories in office at the same time as defaming their own leader with an underhanded scam. These are exposed at a granular level by the Ford report and also the Al Jazeera documentary The Labour Files, which I highly recommend to anybody watching, especially former Labour members and voters. But in this video, I'll summarise the main two tactics used by Corbyn's internal enemies and the Tories alike. Number 1. Keir Starmer changes Labour's second referendum policy. In 2016, the same year as the first attempted coup against Jeremy Corbyn, you'll no doubt be aware that there was a referendum in the UK as to whether the country should remain in the EU or leave the world's biggest trading bloc and customs union. I mean, like, it was on the news every day for what felt like forever. The furore following the vote, which the Leave campaign won by a slim 52% to 48%, was not only immense but also very long-winded. Arguments over whether the result was legally binding, in what manner we would leave the Union, whether we should have a second referendum with the result being so close, etc., ad nauseum, went on both through the 2017 general election and for another 2 years after that, right up to the last poll in the penultimate month of 2019. But by this point, something very significant had changed. You might remember that earlier in the video I reminded you in 2017 the Tory and Labour position on a second referendum were both the same, and that the first referendum result would be honoured and there'd be no return to the polls to ask again. But with it looking increasingly likely that the 2019 election would either result in a hung parliament or a Labour victory, the powers that be within the CLP, the right wing of the PLP, the Conservatives and also the mainstream media and Zionist lobbies felt that they had to do something to stop Corbyn in his tracks, with them having a mutual interest in hindering a democratic socialist who is, as he always has been, an advocate for peace and an end to global conflicts, including a free Palestine. There were many sordid characters involved in this plot, but probably the most significant one came from within Labour itself, Sir Keir Starmer. Keith, former Director of Public Prosecutions, son of a nurse and toolmaker, the Starmer bot. You know, this guy.
Under my leadership, we will engage constructively with the government. Not opposition for opposition's sake, not scoring party political points, or making impossible demands, but with the courage to support where that's the right thing to do.
Let me take you to Keith's fondue lounge as we join Tony Blair, Peter Mandelson and Margaret Hodge for the story of what went down in Labour Town. Keith deliberately left this until the last moment for maximum impact, but this move really does reveal that his only intention since joining just 4 years prior had been to stop the newly elected leader of the opposition and to further his own career and line his own pockets with Israeli lobbyist money. While he was Shadow Brexit Secretary in 2019, he decided to announce, without consulting Jeremy Corbyn at conference, that Labour would be backing a second referendum should Labour win the next election.
And so I can tell you today, an incoming Labour government will legislate for a referendum immediately on taking power and hold that referendum within 6 months.
Whatever you think about whether the UK should have remained in the EU or your stance on another referendum, this was hugely significant for what would follow. Here's why. This would immediately disenfranchise everybody who voted for Labour in 2017 who also voted to leave the EU. Starmer immediately wiped off millions of Labour votes from the 12.9 million they achieved 2 years earlier, and gave the Tories and the press a stick to beat Corbyn with, them accusing the leader of the opposition of disrespecting a democratic decision as they saw it and being untrustworthy when it comes to sticking to policies. The other factor was that Keith knew that should Corbyn step in to overrule him, that this would open the door to accusations of fractions within the party from the Murdoch press, among others, and diminish the notion of an all-inclusive Labour under his leadership, something Jeremy was vocal about wanting to happen, and this left him in a deliberately manufactured awkward position. He was set up to having to answer for Starmer's divisive announcement. After years of debates and news stories day after day, one of the things voters considered most when they went to vote 5 years ago was the respective parties' stance on the EU and a second referendum. Just look at the Lib Dems, for example. They were somewhat less subtle on their position, with former leader Jo Swinson leading her party's charge with a literal cry of bollocks to Brexit and precious little else to say. That move worked out less than favourably, shall we say, but I'll be coming on to that soon after I've talked about the other main modus operandi used to keep Corbyn back from moving into Downing Street. Number 2. The anti-Semitism scam. To manufacture a race-baiting, false, deluded, vitriolic, reprehensibly bogus scam against one of the world's most well-known advocates for anti-racist causes, and to insinuate that he and anyone else who criticises Israel is somehow anti-Semitic, is a pile of absolute horseshite. Not content with the amount of disingenuous rhetoric already aimed at Corbyn, the right wing, including internal Labour factions who sought to put more daggers in his back,
I won't knife you in the back, I'll knife you in the front.
or front with completely jumped up accusations of an anti-Semitism crisis within the party. After so many Labour figures moved to steer the conversation around something that simply wasn't true, including Tom Watson, who walked out just days before the election, and a troop of other ghouls who left to form the ridiculous and now disbanded Independent Group. Here are the real facts about the so-called anti-Semitism crisis within Labour. Despite Corbyn doing more to investigate accusations of anti-Semitism, the CLP did their utmost to hinder his reforms at every turn. After years of thorough investigations, only 2 members were expelled from the party for anti-Semitic offences. That puts the rate at 1 in every 300,000 according to membership levels at the time. The mainstream media persisted this myth, along with right-wing parties, whose levels of anti-Semitism and other forms of racism were much higher than Corbyn's at the same time. The appalling remarks that were made against Luciana Berger did not come from a Labour member or even a Labour voter for that matter. However, she claimed that they did and went on a series of disingenuous news appearances to declare that Jews weren't safe in the Labour Party. This is a shameful act that is not only untrue, but can detract from genuine cases of anti-Semitism. The perpetrator in question was actually a right-wing neo-fascist. The accusations are, and always were, a scam. Corbyn was also subjected to false accusations of being a Czech spy, that he would disband the British Army if elected and would bankrupt the country. On top of the aforementioned disastrous second referendum announcement by Starmer, this put more holes in Corbyn's back than a sieve, and the Get Brexit Done slogan being touted by Johnson meant that those naive enough to switch to voting Tory handed them a victory.
As we have outlined throughout this entire campaign, the focus has been on Brexit. You know, we've had that gridlock in Parliament. We want to get Brexit done. You've heard the Prime Minister say this. Get it done before Christmas, introduce the legislation and get that moving.
The results? Labour lost 60 seats and the Tories got a majority of 80, pretty much undoing the work that Corbyn did 2 years prior. Many on the right, including from Labour, will try and argue that this counts as the party's worst ever result, but I'll dutifully remind them that in 2010 Gordon Brown lost over 90 seats, 50% more than Corbyn. Something else to consider is that Keir Starmer has purged more Jews from the Labour Party than any other previous leader. His excuse for doing so is that they're critical of Israel's occupation of Palestine and their collective punishment upon the population. Although many of us have been aware for some time that this narrative, trope, whatever you want to call it, still persists with Starmer, not only failing to deny it when Sunak launches it at him at PMQs, but also attempting to use the lie as the basis for his changed Labour Party rhetoric as well. With former leader Jeremy Corbyn having the parliamentary whip removed by Starmer, simply for stating that the accusations made against him were vastly overstated by the media. While he still remains a member of the party, he'll be standing as an independent in his Islington North seat later this year. The current leader has now completely turned his back on Corbyn in the most cowardly fashion in order to further his own political career. The result of the 2019 election did untold damage to the country as we were led through the COVID pandemic by a womanising piss artist and another womanising health secretary with an IQ smaller than his shoe size. Naturally, the Tories' promises about leaving the EU turned out to be complete and utter lies. They've continued with austerity-based policies that have burdened millions of people and completely failed to tackle every problem that they've been presented with. When it was revealed that the Tories were holding parties at number 10 during lockdown, the population had had enough, as had Johnson's party rivals who grew tired of having to answer for his actions on a daily basis. As with all of his other previous jobs, Johnson left in disgrace, and we've now had 3 prime ministers in the last 5 years, with Johnson being followed by someone who couldn't outlast a lettuce, and then the wealthiest ever prime minister who's so detached from reality and ordinary people that he didn't even know the procedure for buying a fizzy drink at a garage, and recently tried to impress workers at a Welsh brewery by asking them if they were looking forward to the European football tournament coming up, despite being a teetotaler himself and Wales not qualifying for the tournament.
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I said at the start of the video that I think Labour's 20-point lead in the polls is a poor yardstick for figuring out the likely outcome of the next general election. Before I explain why I usually take poll figures with a small pinch of salt, for those of you who do like to use them as a reliable metric, I'll point out that since I began editing this very video, Starmer's lead has dropped from 20 to 12 points, even though Sunak just announced that he'd bring back national service.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Nothing can stop Labour winning the next election, and the name of that nothing is Keir Starmer. If anyone can fuck this up, it's this guy. If anyone can blow a 30-point lead, Starmer.
Personally, I think the polls lately have been pretty inaccurate. Let's take the last 2 general elections, for example. Last time out, Labour were practically neck and neck with the Tories and then lost 60 seats. Before that, in 2017, everyone was expecting Theresa May to back Corbyn off her shoulder with ease, but a parliamentary majority was utterly destroyed. Then when you look at the local election polls, they've all predicted that Labour would make far more gains than they actually did after the votes were counted, including the one earlier this month where Labour failed to mop up even half of the councillors that the Tories lost. This is largely down to people being dishonest in polls or changing their minds. Many voters don't even decide who they'll vote for until they go into the polling station, and so on. However, a projection of the local election results onto the next general election would mean that Labour would fail around 30 seats short of an actual majority, and we'd be looking at a hung parliament, not the landslide 1997-esque victory that Keith has been expecting. Though the mainstream media don't like to talk about it, this is also down to a recent upsurge in support for independent candidates and the Green Party, something I can see happening on the 4th of July, and also something I encourage because, unlike the GTTO squad, I'm more than aware that for things to actually improve in this country, then we need to get a socialist government in, and not just simply switch from blue Tory to red Tory every 5 years. For reasons that I've already mentioned, that chance was missed in 2019, and now I feel that Labour are fully compromised as a neoliberal party. There's no 3D chess going on, and Labour will not shift left if elected, as some are trying to claim. I've mentioned many times how Starmer's stated that he admires Thatcher, how he's deselected socialist candidates, and how he's removed left-wing members en masse. That's all the evidence you need as to why the main 3 parties in England are now different shades of the same right-wing politics. Even Tory fangirl Laura Kussenberg has started to cotton onto that notion. This article came out just a couple of days ago. Whether you back Labour or not, there's no denying that the public simply aren't enthusiastic about Keir Starmer. He seldom speaks in public, and when he's attempted to do so, he fails to draw anything like the crowds that his predecessor did. Corbyn even appeared on stage at Glastonbury to an enthusiastic audience, but Starmer doesn't draw a crowd or receive any real enthusiasm from anyone. The quips he tries to use at PMQs are cringeworthy. His robotic delivery, twinned with Rachel Reeves's, are not exactly ear-grabbers, nor is the boardroom-oriented syntax that's indistinguishable from the Tories. For example, if I hear the word deliver from either of the parties just one more time, I'm likely to have a very large brain aneurysm. Similar to Sunak, he has no real connection with the public. For example, in the line he keeps repeating about being the son of a toolmaker, he fails to disclose that his father was the factory owner. That relaunch video I mentioned earlier is also dreadful, littered with more Union flags than a London gift shop, lacking anything worthy in terms of policy, and if you Photoshop Sunak's head onto Keith, then you genuinely think that it was a Tory party political broadcast. It's not only exposed him as a Tory in disguise, but also a charmless man indeed. This is going to hold him back in England, but will also be significant in Scotland, where he'll need to take many seats from the SNP, something I'm confident that he doesn't have in him to gain the majority he needs. The Scots are more wary of Tories than most south of the border, so it seems.
I think I can smell shite. Yes, I can definitely smell shite.
The parties are yet to release their election manifestos, and I'll of course be releasing more content along with live streams as we get through the next month or so. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to keep up to date with the latest. For now though, I'd like to highlight a few seats that will be worth keeping an eye on as the results come in. Bristol Central. This is a projected result, not a poll based on the local elections, and I think it's pretty significant and indicative of something I've been talking about for a while on the channel. The Green Party, who currently only have one seat in the House of Commons, even though they garnered nearly 1 million votes, thanks to first past the post, but they look set to gain Bristol Central. You can see here that they're tempting voters over from Labour. Green policies are, of course, coming to the forefront of people's minds when they think about who they'll vote for. I'm certainly one of them myself. Many people who I know as well and have met since the last election have made the same transition. Some of them even stood for the Green Party in the last local elections. Though this is the first time out for new party leaders Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey since Caroline Lucas stood down, an interesting factor coming up this July will be that for the first time ever there will be a Green Party candidate in every constituency. Their support's been on the rise across the board lately as we get deeper and deeper into climate breakdown, and I'll be predicting how many seats I think they'll gain towards the end of this video. Hackney North and Stoke Newington. Okay, so I've been editing this video for a few days now, and every time I sit down at my computer, the situation has changed concerning Diane Abbott and whether she'll stand to hold her seat under Labour or as an independent. I'm sure you've seen the news stories this week. Even as I'm recording this now, it's still unclear how this will pan out, but if she does stand as an independent, then I've got no doubt that she'll be backed by her constituents as she has been since 1987. She currently has a majority of over 33,000, and I expect her to at least retain that. This would be mud in the eye for Starmer, of course, which leads me on to the next one to watch. Islington North. One thing we do know at the moment is that Jeremy Corbyn will be standing as an independent in his London seat. I saw this one coming a while back, and now it's come to pass. He will, of course, still win with a strong majority, but that fact's also assured even further now that Paul Mason will be taking over from Corbyn as the Labour candidate. For more on what I think about Mason's laughable nomination, please check out the live stream links at the top of the screen and the other video content on him from the channel. It was rumoured for a while that Corbyn's Peace and Justice project might become a political party, with Jeremy standing as the leader, but that hasn't come to pass. You'll remember as well that he was made an offer by George Galloway to form a political coalition, which was also turned down. But this brings me up to the penultimate seat on the list, Rochdale. You will of course remember that Galloway stole this seat from Labour in a by-election earlier on this year. The question since then has been whether he'll be able to hold it for the Workers' Party of Britain in a general election. With the occupation of Palestine still weighing heavily in the public consciousness and Israel carrying out an ongoing military offensive on Rafah in southern Gaza, it looks likely that he will do so. Labour have put up a new candidate, but like in so many other seats, there's no real enthusiasm behind the party, and this is one of the reasons I think grassroots parties and independents will be winning votes on a few seats at the next ballot. There's also an interesting campaign developing that could really hurt Labour in the final seat that I want to mention here, Holborn and St Pancras. This is Keir Starmer's seat, and it's the first time he's had to defend it as party leader. While this would normally be a fairly safe seat for Labour, Andrew Feinstein is mounting a challenge that is so far getting a lot of support, and again the issue of Israel's occupation of Palestine is a large part of the campaign, with the no ceasefire, no vote movement growing by the week. Whatever the overall outcome of the general election, it would be unprecedented that the main opposition leader would lose his seat even if Labour win an overall victory. We'll be keeping a very close eye on this one. Finally, I want to make a quick few predictions about the outcome of the election, including some of the seats I just mentioned, as well as other things that look likely to happen at the moment. I'm expecting a low turnout, mostly with people being sick of the Tories, but also uninspired by Keith's Labour Party. I expect around a 60 to 65% turnout. The Green Party to win around 5 seats. I think they'll win Bristol Central, as I mentioned before, as well as a few others for reasons I've already stated, and it would not surprise me to see the same thing happening with independent candidates too. Reform Party to win 0 seats, as they will not be mopping up the Tory votes like they expect to. Hopefully, Richard Tice and Nigel Farage will get the hint and finally piss off and disband the party. The fact that they get so much mainstream media airtime is an absolute disgrace, and it shows the poor standards of media that we have in the UK at the moment. The SNP to hold a majority in Scotland. I might be sticking my neck out with this one especially, but a lot of people have been speculating that the SNP are going to be losing a lot of seats in the upcoming election, although for reasons I've already mentioned, I don't think Scottish Labour or any other party are going to pick up enough seats for that to happen. It'll be a pretty close call, I'm pretty sure of that. But I'm thinking as well as hoping a little bit that they'll just about hang on in there. For the overall results, I have to be honest, I can really see a hung parliament happening. The Tories will definitely take a walloping, but Starmer's lack of appeal mixed with a low turnout means at the moment I think Labour will fall short of the win line. This is also backed by those aforementioned projections. I won't speculate at the moment on any kind of deals that might be done to form a coalition between the parties, but as always, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments along with your predictions for the result. There's going to be lots more content on the election to come here on My Left Eye. Thanks for your patience while I've been editing this video. It's been a little quiet lately on the channel, but now I'm looking forward to getting stuck into more videos and streams. I want to end by giving a massive shout out to the members on the channel. Your support is massively appreciated. Please do join the channel, hit the link under the video or in the description. It's just 99p and there's lots of perks including exclusive content, early viewing and static emojis to use on my regular live streams. Please do consider supporting the channel and you can join the list of awesome people that you can see on your screen right now. That's all from me for now, but thanks again for watching. Take care everybody and My Left Eye will be seeing you soon.